Admiral Yuki Tanaka stood on the bridge of the battleship Defiance and watched the final message from the Galactic Hegemony play across the main screen. The alien who spoke was a Telvari, one of the 12 elder species that ruled known space for 40,000 years. And his 4 eyes showed nothing but cold satisfaction as he read the judgment. By unanimous vote of the Hegemony Council, the species known as humanity is hereby delicensed from galactic civilization, the Telvari announced in a voice that carried no emotion. All human territories are struck from navigation charts effective immediately, and all trade routes to human space are permanently sealed. Tanaka felt her crew grow still around her as the alien continued speaking, communication relays connecting. Human space to the galactic network will be deactivated within 1 standard hour, and any human vessel that crosses the quarantine boundary will be destroyed without warning, while any elder citizen found providing aid to humans will face immediate execution. The Telvari paused, and something like a smile crossed his alien features. Humanity is now a non-entity, and the hegemony wishes you a peaceful decline into obscurity. The screen went dark and silence filled the bridge of the Defiance. Tanaka understood exactly why this was happening, even though the official reason was humanity's refusal to surrender their military vessels and submit to something the hegemony called civilizational guidance. The real reason was fear. Humanity had only been traveling among the stars for 300 years, which was nothing compared to the elder races who measured their histories in tens of thousands of years. But in that short time, humans had done something that terrified the ancient powers. They had learned human engineers had taken apart hegemony technology and figured out how it worked, then built their own versions that were sometimes even better than the originals. And human scientists asked questions that the elder races had stopped asking millennia ago. The hegemony had grown comfortable in their power, and they had not faced a real challenge in 10,000 years. So when they looked at humanity, they saw something dangerous. They saw a species that refused to accept that things had to stay the same forever. Admiral, her first officer, Commander Chun, spoke quietly. The hegemony relay satellites are powering down. Tanaka watched through the view screen as the blinking lights on the nearest satellite went dark one by one. And she knew that across human space, the same thing was happening everywhere Earth. And her 17 colony worlds were being cut off from the rest of the galaxy. No more trade with alien civilizations meant no more access to rare materials that humans had come to depend on. And no more communication meant no way to call for help if disaster struck. The elder races expected humanity to collapse within a generation, to fall into wars over shrinking resources, and eventually fade away like so many species before them. Tanaka turned to face her bridge crew, and she saw the shock on their faces as the reality of what had just happened sank in. Lieutenant Park at the navigation console was staring at her screens where star charts were already being updated with the new reality of humanity's isolation ensign, Okafor, and communications was frantically trying to reach other human vessels as the relay network collapsed around them. Commander Chun stood rigid with his hands clasped behind his back, but Tanaka could see the tension in his shoulders. These were good people, and they were afraid because everything they knew had just changed. But as Tanaka looked around the bridge, she saw something else beginning to replace the fear. She saw anger, not the hot anger that burns out quickly, but the cold, determined anger that drives people to do impossible things. She had seen that anger before in the history books, in the stories of humans who faced extinction and refused to accept it. "Listen to me," Tanaka said, and her voice was calm but carried to every corner of the bridge. "The hegemony has made a mistake today, and they do not even realize it." The crew turned to look at her. "They think they have erased us," Tanaka continued. "They think that by cutting us off from their civilization, they have condemned us to death. But they have forgotten something important about humanity." She walked to the center of the bridge where everyone could see her clearly. "We did not become a spacefaring species because the elder races helped us. And we did not build our colonies because someone gave us permission, because we did it ourselves through struggle and sacrifice and the refusal to give up. Commander Chun was nodding slowly, and Tanaka could see the fire returning to his eyes. The hegemony thinks isolation will destroy us, she said, but isolation is how we have always grown strongest. Because when we have no one to rely on but ourselves, we discover what we are truly capable of. Tanaka turned back to the view screen where the last satellite had gone dark. Send a message to Earth Command, she ordered, and to every human vessel and colony in range before the network goes completely silent. What message, Admiral? Ensign Okafor asked. Tanaka felt something rising in her chest that she recognized as hope, not the soft hope of someone waiting to be saved, but the hard hope of someone ready to fight. Tell them that the hegemony has made their move, she said, and now it is time to make ours, because Earth remembers how to survive, and we will show the galaxy what happens when you try to erase humanity. The bridge erupted in activity as her crew rushed to carry out her orders through the view screen. Tanaka could see Mars hanging in space with Earth visible as a distant blue dot beyond it. Somewhere out there, 17 colony worlds were receiving the same terrible news and facing the same choice. They could accept their erasure and fade quietly into history as the hegemony expected, or they could do what humans had always done when faced with impossible odds. They could fight back, and as the last connection to galactic civilization went silent, Yuki Tanaka made a promise to the stars that had just tried to forget her species. They would regret this decision. They would learn that humanity was not so easy to erase, and when Earth returned to the galactic stage, it would not be as a conquered people begging for acceptance. It would be as something the elder races had never faced before, a species with nothing left to lose and everything to prove. 10 years passed, and the galactic hegemony forgot about the humans they had erased from the maps. The elder races returned to their ancient routines of ceremonial functions and political games, while occasionally making jokes about the erased ones. At their endless diplomatic gatherings, I heard the humans have probably eaten each other by now, a Talvari ambassador said at one such function, and the other delegates laughed at the thought of the primitive young species tearing itself apart. They were so confident in their judgment that they did not notice the anomalies at first. A mining station on the galactic rim went dark without explanation, and the hegemony sent investigators who found nothing but empty corridors and silent machines. A patrol vessel vanished near a dead system, and when search parties arrived, they discovered only debris floating in the void. Strange signals flickered at the edge of sensor range and then disappeared before anyone could identify their source. The hegemony dismissed these incidents as pirates or equipment failures or cosmic interference, because the alternative was too disturbing to consider. Inside the quarantine zone, humanity had transformed itself. The shock of erasure had done something that centuries of internal conflict could not accomplish. And for the first time in their history, all of humanity united behind a single-purpose survival. Admiral Tanaka now commanded Earth's combined fleet from a massive space station hidden in the shadow of Jupiter, and she watched with pride as her species did what it had always done when facing extinction. They adapted human mining vessels, stripped asteroids for resources that the elder races had said were inaccessible, and human engineers built shipyards in places that the hegemony star charts said were empty. Most importantly, human scientists began to unlock the secrets of elder technology, not through careful patient study, but through wild experimentation that the ancient races would have considered insane. The faster-than-light drive was the greatest challenge because the hegemony had guarded this technology more closely than any other. Human engineers died by the hundreds in failed tests that tore ships apart or sent them tumbling into stars. But each failure taught them something new, and each death brought them closer to understanding. After 4 years of sacrifice, they succeeded. The first human-designed FTL drive was ugly and crude compared to the elegant hegemony systems, and it tore through space-time with brutal violence instead of bending it gently. But it worked, and it was 3 times faster than anything the elder races possessed. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Cole was 28 years old when he volunteered to lead the first reconnaissance mission beyond the quarantine boundary. His ship, the Shadow Runner, was barely larger than a shuttle, and it carried experimental stealth technology that human scientists had developed by asking questions the elder races considered forbidden. What if we could bend light around a ship instead of just absorbing it? They had asked, and the hegemony would have called such thinking impossible. The Shadow Runner proved them wrong. Cole and his crew of 4 slipped past the quarantine patrols like ghosts and spent 6 months gathering intelligence from the heart of hegemony space. What they discovered changed everything. The elder races were not the enlightened civilization they claimed to be. And the hegemony was not a government dedicated to peace and prosperity. It was a system of control that had maintained power for 40,000 years by eliminating any species that might challenge them. Cole found records of dozens of species that had been delicensed over the millennia, and some had been exterminated completely, while their names were erased from history. Others had survived, but only as slave labor on industrial worlds, where they worked until they died for the comfort of their masters. The Veth were one such species, and Cole watched from hiding as gray-skinned beings with too many joints in their limbs loaded cargo onto hegemony vessels under the watchful eyes of armed guards. The Korath were another, and these 4 armed warriors had once been the most feared fighters in the galaxy before the hegemony broke them. Everywhere Cole looked, he found the same pattern of erasure and enslavement hidden beneath the surface of civilization and order. When he returned to Earth space with his findings, Admiral Tanaka called an emergency meeting of humanity's War Council. We were not quarantined to protect the galaxy from us, Tanaka said as she reviewed Cole's intelligence reports. We were quarantined because the hegemony recognized us as a threat to their power. The council members studied the evidence of atrocities stretching back 30,000 years and something. Hardened in their expressions, humanity had spent 10 years preparing to survive. Now they began preparing for something else. We cannot fight the hegemony alone, Commander Chun said. Their fleet outnumbers ours by hundreds to 1. Marcus Cole, who had been promoted to a captain after his successful mission, spoke up from his seat at the table. We are not alone, he said. There are dozens of species out there who have suffered under the hegemony, and they have been waiting for someone to give them hope. Admiral Tanaka nodded slowly as a new strategy began to form in her mind. Then that is exactly what we will give them, she said. We will show them that erasure is not permanent and that the hegemony can be challenged. She turned to face the view screen that showed the stars beyond the station. We will show them that humanity remembers what the elder races have forgotten, she continued. And we will teach them that some things cannot be erased no matter how hard you try. The silent years were ending, and the galaxy was about to learn that humanity had not been quietly dying in their isolation. They had been preparing to return. Captain Amara Asay commanded the stealth cruiser Unexpected Virtue on a reconnaissance mission near the edge of hegemony space when her communications officer detected a distress signal. Captain, we are picking up an emergency broadcast, Lieutenant Torres reported from his station. It is coming from a transport vessel approximately 2 light minutes from our position. Azay pulled up the sensor data on her display and studied the readings carefully. The transport was a small civilian vessel running without weapons, and it was being pursued by 2 hegemony enforcement cruisers that were closing the distance rapidly. Can you identify who is on the transport? Asay asked. Torres worked his console for a moment before answering. The ship registry identifies them as Veth refugees, he said quietly. Approximately 300 of them, including children. Asay felt her jaw tighten as she remembered the intelligence reports about the Veth species. And she knew what happened to refugees who were caught by hegemony enforcement vessels. They disappeared into labor camps and were never seen again. Standard protocol says we observe and report, her first officer, Commander Jackson, reminded her. We cannot risk exposing our presence for a single transport. He was right, and Asay knew it because the mission parameters were clear and the unexpected virtue was too valuable to risk on a rescue operation. But something in her refused to watch. 300 innocent beings be dragged away to slavery while she did nothing. Helm set an intercept course. She ordered Commander Jackson step closer and lowered his voice. Captain, if we engage those cruisers, we reveal that humanity is still active, he said. The hegemony will know we have been operating in their space. Asay looked at her first. Officer, and made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. Then they will know. She said, because I did not join this fight to hide while innocents suffer, and I will not start today. The unexpected virtue dropped its stealth field and accelerated toward the fleeing transport. On the bridge of the lead hegemony cruiser, Captain Varax of the Tulvari species watched his sensors with growing confusion as a new contact appeared from empty space. What is that? He demanded. Where did it come from? His sensor officers stared at the readings with all four eyes wide with disbelief. Sir, the vessel configuration does not match any known design, the officer reported, but the power signatures are consistent. With human technology, Varax felt a chill run through his body, because humans were supposed to be extinct or at least dying in their quarantine zone. They were certainly not supposed to be operating advanced warships in hegemony space. The unknown vessel positioned itself between the enforcement cruisers and the refugee transport, and then it opened a communication channel. Captain Asay appeared on the screen, and her dark eyes held no fear as she looked at the hegemony captains. This is the Earth vessel Unexpected Virtue, she announced. Those refugees are under our protection, and you have 60 seconds to withdraw. Varax recovered from his shock and felt anger replace his confusion. You have no authority here, human, he snarled. Your species was erased from the galactic community, and you do not exist. Asay smiled, and it was not a friendly expression. Then you have nothing to worry about, she replied, because ships that do not exist cannot hurt you. So I suggest you leave before you find out how wrong you are. Varax ended the communication and gave the order to attack because the hegemony did not negotiate with a race species. The battle lasted 43 seconds. The unexpected virtue moved with a speed and agility that should have been impossible for a ship its size, and its weapons cut through hegemony shields like they were made of paper. Varax watched in horror as his sister ship exploded in a flash of light, and then his own vessel shuddered as human weapons tore through the hull. The last thing he saw was the impossible human ship turning away from his dying cruiser to escort the refugee transport to safety. Word of the encounter spread through the underground networks that connected the hegemony's forgotten victims. The erased ones were not dead. They were coming back. Over the following months, human ships appeared throughout hegemony space, and always they came in defense of the oppressed. They rescued slaves from transport vessels and destroyed enforcement stations that served as prison camps. They fought hegemony patrols and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. And everywhere they went, they left behind the same message broadcast on all frequencies in every known language. You tried to erase us and you failed. So now we are erasing your chains. The oppressed species began to whisper a new word that they had not dared to speak in thousands of years. Hope. The Hegemony Council convened an emergency session on their capital world, and the 12 elder species gathered to discuss a problem they had never anticipated. The humans were supposed to collapse. The Telvari representative said with barely controlled fury. They were supposed to destroy themselves. Instead, they have become a symbol. Another delegate observed. The other erased species are beginning to see them as liberators. The council argued for hours about how to respond while their civilization trembled beneath them. For the first time in 10,000 years, the elder races felt something they had forgotten existed: fear. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, Captain Amara Asay guided her ship toward another rescue mission, because humanity had not returned to the galaxy for revenge. They had returned to remind the universe that some things could never be erased, and the stars were just beginning to learn what that meant. The hegemony could not understand what humanity was building because their ancient minds could only think in terms of conquest and control. Admiral Yuki Tanaka stood in the great assembly hall of Station Unity and looked out at the gathered representatives of 17 species that the hegemony had tried to destroy. The Veth delegation sat in specially designed chairs that accommodated their many-jointed limbs, and their gray faces showed cautious hope as they listened to the proceedings. The crystalline axe communicated through pulses of light that translation devices converted to speech, and their forms sparkled like living diamonds in the assembly hall. The four-armed Korath warriors stood at attention with pride in their bearing for the first time in generations, and their presence reminded everyone that strength came in many forms. Each species brought something unique to the alliance, and each had been told by the hegemony that they were inferior or dangerous or wrong together. They were discovering a truth that the elder races had buried long ago. Diversity was not weakness, it was strength. "We are not building an empire," Tanaka announced to the assembly. "We are building a family of free peoples, united by a shared understanding that every voice matters and every species has value." The Veth representative rose to speak, and her translator converted her whistling language into words that everyone could understand. "For 1,000 years, my people have served the hegemony as slaves," she said. "We forgot that we once built great cities and created beautiful art. But the humans have given us back our history, and for that we pledge our knowledge to this alliance." The Veth had mastered biotechnology in ways that even the elder races could not match, and their expertise would help the alliance develop medical treatments and agricultural systems that could sustain entire worlds. The axe speaker pulsed with brilliant light as they made their own pledge. "We will share the secrets of our energy shields," the translation said. "For too long we have hidden in our crystal caves while the hegemony hunted our kind. But now we will stand with those who stand for freedom." One by one, the representatives of the erased species made their commitments to the coalition. And with each pledge, the alliance grew stronger. Captain Marcus Cole arrived at Station Unity 3 days later with news that would change everything. He had led a daring raid on a hegemony archive world, where the elder races stored records dating back 30,000 years, and what his team had retrieved made the gathered representatives fall silent with horror. "The hegemony is not a natural government," Cole reported to the assembly. "It did not evolve through cooperation or shared purpose." He activated the display, and ancient records filled the air above the council table. 40,000 years ago, the 12 elder species were not elder at all. Cole continued. They were simply the first to develop faster than light travel, and they used that advantage to eliminate any competition. The records showed evidence of species that had been rising toward greatness before the proto-hegemony destroyed them. Civilizations that might have built wonders were snuffed out before they could reach the stars. Cultures that might have enriched the galaxy were erased so completely that not even their names survived. Every species that showed potential for growth or change was systematically eliminated, Cole said. The hegemony did not maintain peace. They maintained control. And they have been doing it for 40,000 years. The Korath commander spoke, and his voice was rough with anger. "My people were warriors who believed in honor," he said. "The hegemony told us that our fighting spirit was a danger to civilization. So they broke us and made us forget who we were. He gestured at the ancient records that documented his species' fall from proud warriors to broken slaves. But we remember now. He continued, and we will teach your soldiers what the hegemony took from us. The coalition broadcast the truth across the galaxy using every communication channel they could. Access hegemony citizens who had always believed in their civilization's goodness began to see the reality hidden beneath the surface. And protests erupted on elder homeworlds as ordinary beings demanded answers from their leaders. Some hegemony species defected entirely, with their populations voting to join the coalition rather than support a government built on lies. The elder races watched their empire begin to crack, and they gathered to make a decision that would determine the future of the galaxy. They could acknowledge the truth and work toward reform that would give all species a voice in galactic affairs, or they could fight to preserve the power they had held for 40,000 years. The Hegemony High Council voted unanimously for war. Admiral Tanaka received the declaration while standing on the bridge of her new flagship, the Unity of Purpose. They have chosen, she said to her assembled commanders. Now we must show them that some choices cannot be undone. The coalition began preparing for the greatest battle in galactic history. And across thousands of worlds, beings of every shape and form readied themselves to fight for something the hegemony had tried to erase: freedom, hope, the right to exist without fear. Tanaka looked at the star charts that showed the positions of enemy and allied forces, and she knew that the coming conflict would cost many lives. But she also knew that some things were worth fighting, for some things were worth dying for, and some things could never truly be erased no matter how hard the powerful tried. Send word to all coalition forces, she ordered. We move in 30 days. The war for the soul of the galaxy was about to begin. The Void of Ancients was a region of space that the hegemony considered sacred because it was here that their civilization had been born 40,000 years ago. The elder races had gathered their entire combined fleet in this symbolic location, and 12,000 vessels representing the accumulated power of millennia waited in perfect formation. Admiral Tanaka brought the coalition fleet out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the void and studied the enemy forces on her tactical display. 8,000 ships flew under coalition colors, and they represented humanity and the Veth and the Axe and the Korath and a dozen other species that had been told they were not worthy of existence. They were outnumbered, but they were not afraid. Admiral, we are being hailed by the hegemony flagship. A communications officer reported. Tanaka nodded, and the face of High Admiral Vexus appeared on the screen. Vexus was 6,000 years old, and he had commanded hegemony forces for longer than humanity had existed as a species. And his ancient eye showed nothing but contempt for the gathered rebels. You cannot win this battle, Vexus said. Your fleet is inferior in every way, and your coalition of broken species is no match for our power. Tanaka smiled because she had been waiting for this moment. You are right that we cannot match your numbers, she admitted, but we have something you lost a long time ago. She gave a signal, and across the galaxy, a transmission began to broadcast. The entire archive of erased history played on every screen, on every world in known space. Trillions of beings watched the truth unfold as records showed atrocity after atrocity stretching back 30,000 years. They saw the species that had been destroyed, and the cultures that had been enslaved, and the lies that had kept the hegemony in power. We came here to offer you a choice, Tanaka said to Vexus. The same choice you denied us, and the same choice you denied 100 species before us. She leaned forward, and her voice carried the weight of everyone who had ever been erased. Change, she said, or be remembered as you truly were. High Admiral Vexus ended the communication and gave the order to attack. The battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Hegemony ships advanced in the rigid formations they had used for millennia. But coalition forces fought with a creativity that the elder races could not predict. Human captains improvised tactics in real time and adapted to changing conditions faster than their ancient enemies could respond. Karath boarding parties launched themselves at enemy vessels in armored pods, and the four-armed warriors carved through hegemony crews with a ferocity that their ancestors would have been proud of. Veth bioships regenerated damage between engagements, while Axe energy shields protected the fleet with barriers of crystalline. Light ships died on both sides in silent explosions that scattered debris across the void. Admiral Tanaka felt her flagship shudder as enemy weapons found their mark. But she did not waver. All ships maintain formation, she ordered. We hold the line. Captain Marcus Cole commanded a strike group that punched through the hegemony formation to attack their flagship directly. His ships took terrible losses, but they kept coming because they were fighting for something more important than survival. They were fighting for the right to exist. On worlds across the galaxy, beings watched the battle, and something began to change hegemony citizens who had supported the war saw the truth of what their civilization had done, and they began to question whether such crimes were worth defending on the battlefield itself. Hegemony captains started to hesitate. A Telvari commander looked at the coalition ships and saw not enemies, but beings fighting for freedom. A patrol squadron powered down their weapons and broadcast surrender. Then another squadron followed, and another. The war did not end with a decisive military victory. It ended with a choice. Ship after ship in the hegemony fleet stopped fighting as their crews refused to continue killing for a civilization built on lies. High Admiral Vegas screamed orders that went unanswered as his own officers turned away from their consoles. His flagship was disabled not by enemy fire, but by a mutiny from his own crew. When the weapons finally fell silent, Admiral Tanaka looked out at the scattered remains of two fleets and felt something she had not expected. Not triumph, but sadness for all the lives that had been lost and all the years that had been wasted on hatred and fear. She opened a channel to all surviving vessels. The war is over, she announced. Today, we begin building something new together. 1 year later, Tanaka stood before the first session of the new Galactic Assembly. Humans sat beside Veth and Axe, beside Korath and elder races, beside those they had once oppressed. The old maps that had shown only the chosen species were gone, and new maps displayed every world and every species and every name that had ever been erased. Earth appeared as a small blue dot in an unremarkable arm of an ordinary galaxy. But that small dot had changed everything. A young Veth delegate approached Tanaka after the session, and her many joined. Limbs moved with grace that would have been impossible when her species lived in chains. Why did you do it? The delegate asked. Why did humanity risk everything to free species you had never even met? Tanaka thought about the question for a long moment before answering. Because that is who we are, she said. We do not believe that any voice should be silenced or that any species should be erased. She looked out at the gathered representatives of 100 worlds. The hegemony thought civilization survived through control and fear. She continued, but we know better, because civilization survived through connection and through the simple truth that we are stronger together than apart. The Veth delegate nodded slowly, and something like hope shone in her eyes. The stars tried to forget humanity, she said. Tanaka smiled and shook her head. They did, she agreed. But now the stars will remember. And in the great assembly hall where species that had been enemies now sat as equals, the future of the galaxy began to take shape, not through conquest or control, but through the simple revolutionary act of remembering every name, every voice, every species that had ever been erased. Because in the end, the hegemony had been wrong about everything. Erasure was never permanent, and some things burned too brightly to ever be forgotten.